Jesus says, I am the light of the world. St. Paul says in that second reading, so live as children of light. It's the light of Jesus that enables us to truly see things as God sees them. The gospel that we heard today, this beautiful passage, reveals what happens in baptism. Through the waters of baptism, the soul is cleansed, and we receive the light of faith. And we receive confirmation that grace is deepened within us. The light of faith allows us to see the world around us and the events in our lives as God sees them. In that first reading that we had from the prophet Samuel, the Lord says to Samuel, he says, not as man sees does God see, because man sees the appearance, but God looks into the heart. In the gospel, the blind man has clay smeared on his eyes and is told, go wash in the pool of Siloam. And suddenly, miraculously, he's able to see. He's no longer blind. Now, have you ever played a game with a blindfold, like pin the tail on the donkey, or took a blind swim at a piñata? Or have you ever participated in a retreat where you did a thing called a trust walk, where you're blindfolded or you're asked to close your eyes tightly and be led in a chain of people? Playing these types of games with a blindfold helps us to appreciate the gift of sight, and also helps us to understand how faith and seeing are very much tied together. Through the cure of a person born blind, St. John's Gospel presents sight in a spiritual sense. See, sometimes, maybe even oftentimes, we look, but we don't truly see. Here, the blind man received not only the ability to see, to use his eyes, but also to see the truth, to recognize Jesus and who he was, and therefore to recognize who he was. In our opening song today, we sang that line, amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost and now am found, was blind, but now I see. That song was written by a man who was many years after he went through this massive conversion. He was a slave trader. He made his money off taking enslaved people and selling them to others. He was a ship captain. He made lots of money, became very wealthy, and was esteemed in his circle. He went through this conversion where he recognized that what he was doing was absolutely evil. Even though the society of his time said this was fine, this was great, it was just part of life, it's the way things are. He became an abolitionist in England, advocating for the abolishment of slavery. And then he wrote this song about the conversion that he went through. To see with the eyes of Jesus is one of those gifts we're given in baptism. This man, he eventually became an Anglican priest and served God in every way that he could. Now, throughout history, there are times where an entire society will be steeped in darkness, will not be able to see the truth of things. It happened in our own country for so many years with slavery and the civil rights movement. It happened in Nazi Germany when So what's our own blindness in our own world today, in our own society? I could go and list the ways that I believe that we're blind. All of us could perhaps do that. What I do know is that the mainstream narrative is not the truth. They're children of darkness and who are engaged in their own self-glorification, who are only concerned about power and wealth, the esteem of others. They don't have that gift of faith. So we have to be on our guard that we're not going to allow that to take over us, to shape the way that we see the world. St. Paul says this, he says, light produces every kind of goodness and righteousness and truth. See, the Pharisees refused to let Jesus open their eyes. They say, we know this man is not from God. And anyone that says he is going to be expelled from the synagogue. The parents of the blind man are a perfect example of those who, even if they see the truth, they're too afraid of the sort of the mainstream narrative, and they're not going to go against it. They're more concerned with their own comfort than standing up and proclaiming the truth. See, it's hard for us to see things as God sees them. Too easily we close our eyes to God's light. The Pharisees refused to believe that this simple, beautiful story from this feisty, crusty beggar. It's annoying when you hear the story. It's like, how can you be so blind? It's baffling to us. But see, the Pharisees see a world of sin and division, of separation. You know, we're followers of Moses. Who are you following, they say. That's what the mainstream narrative is often about. Us versus them. The poor versus the rich. The Democrats versus Republicans. They try to separate us and divide us. That's what the blindness of sin does. A sinful world only sees division and separation. In that beautiful Psalm 23, one of the most famous passages of the Bible, we heard today, even though I walk in the dark valley, I fear no evil, for you are at my side. With your rod and your staff, they give me courage. With the eyes of Jesus, we can see a world of love and connectedness. We can see that no one person, no one group is better or superior to another. With the eyes of Jesus, we're able to see that underneath all the divisions caused by sin, there is a deeper, more abiding truth. The deepest truth of all things is that we are all interconnected in God, in His love. All things, all people are grounded and rooted in the Creator, God, our Father. To see this way is to see as God sees, and to live as children of light. May we always be open to that grace that was first given to us when we were baptized.